And I want to talk a little bit about navigating this, like when you do become a non-drinker, because you can it's a perception. It's not true. You can still stay in your career.
Absolutely.
I've known sober people in every career, right?
Yep.
Even you were twisted through seven. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Sober Fool podcast. I'm Veronica.
And I'm Chip.
So we are going to be talking about probably a subject that's quite prevalent because of the time of year that this is going out. We're going to be talking about drinking and work, the culture of drinking and the workplace. I've been thinking about this because my client group tends to be usually quite senior executives, CEOs, leaders, that kind of thing. And when they're getting sober and they talk about the culture of drinking. So the first thing is, we do kind of joke about this.
Yeah.
And they always say to me, Veronica,
that's what our industry does.
in my industry, there's a lot of drinking in my industry.
I'm a builder. That's what builders do at the end of the day.
I'm in finance.
I'm in finance. That's what you do.
Yeah. I'm in real estate. And I'm going to tell you, I think probably the worst may be hospitality, but I'm going to tell you every industry, teachers, medicine.
Nurses and doctors at the end culture. Of it. Huge drinking culture. I mean, nurses' residences and places like that, and it was notoriously that there would be heavy drinking going on, and I guess the excuse would be, well, we've got to relieve the stress somehow, and that's often the finance thing. Well, I'm working at such a speed, and I'm working such, I've got to have that. But you're right. And I challenge it every time, is that I've had so many clients who said, well, the problem is, Chip, that in my industry, this is what we all do. So it would be very difficult for me to break out and be different. And it doesn't matter what the industry is. And I usually say, what? So all airline pilots get drunk before they fly, do they? And well, no, not all of them. No. But and all builder, it's like, but it's a very commonly used excuse, but it's also backed up by the fact that I do think a lot of companies, organizations, whatever they are nowadays, do kind of perpetuate that myth, and they perpetuate it through just the way they talk about it and talk about alcohol and the language they use. But I certainly have got clients whose offices have got, one's got a drinks trolley that comes round throughout the afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really? That's so like 1960s Mad Men.
No, that happens. I've got another person who has got a floor upstairs, which is basically just a bar. I guess they can sit around and relax as well, but it's basically just a bar where alcohol is available. And I've got another one that's got on their landing, they've got two fridges or two containers. One's a fridge, obviously, for the white wine, because the white wine has to be cold in order to get the most benefit from it, of course, and red wine. And I mean, that's really endorsing the whole kind of culture of drinking. But I do think that I don't know how different it is in America, but in England, Friday night, walking through central London, the streets are absolutely heaving with people falling out of pubs, pouring out onto the street, drinking. And a lot of Americans I have known come over here and go, God, they couldn't understand how people could kind of overflow out of pubs into the street and be drinking in the street. But that's absolutely common.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really common in America. So I had a client in this position who stopped drinking, and he worked in medical device sales. So because healthcare is very different in the States. If you are in the pharmaceutical industry or medical devices, your goal is to build relationships with doctors who will hopefully want to use your products. And I want to say this isn't all, a lot of these products and medications are important and necessary and all of that kind of stuff. But because it's all financially led in the States, a lot of what they do is wine and dine the doctors, and they'll have, they'll invite them to a prestigious golfing tournament, or that kind of thing. And there'll be dine in the absolute best restaurants with the best wines. And he was telling me how, and he's still fairly young and starting out and ambitious and doing really well. And he said, I've just really seen things differently. He said, I was at a sales conference, my whole team were there, and there was these older guys, and they were getting absolutely shit-faced, absolutely paralytic drunk. And then, the next day looking like death, but, going through the conference or whatever it is. And he said, there was a guy a couple of years ago who, and this is what happens is people, their inhibitions go, they do or say something inappropriate. And their career's gone.
Yeah. Immediately come to mind there about 3 or 4 clients I've had over the years who have just got out of control at a conference or at a party or get together or something, and they've said something that they would never have said if they weren't drunk, and it's cost them their careers. And and in some cases, that sort of reputation that often goes with you. You get branded. You get branded then, and it can be very difficult. But this particular podcast is timely because we're coming up to a season where everybody's laying on huge parties for, I guess, over there, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year. I mean, this year, because of the dates on which Christmas and New Year fall, you basically got 10 days of sort of excuses to get drunk. Christmas Eve, Christmas, the following days, the 3 days in between that and New Year, then New Year. It's a wonderful excuse to overdo it. And you can kind of accept, unless you say something sort of out of order to somebody, it is a time of year when it is absolutely kind of almost acceptable to come into work completely hungover, and your colleagues say, God, you really drank a bit last night, didn't you? And rather than, it's almost a badge of honor, or it's like, or how far did you push it? How far could you go? And endorsing very unhealthy behavior.
Yeah, I almost think there's something a little bit classist about it as well, because I think, if you're a blue collar worker, which, involved in some kind of labor or skilled based work, having a drink at lunchtime would be very much frowned on. I mean, like you said, the builders after work, maybe. Yeah. But I think the drinking as part of your work is much more a white collar kind of more executive sale. Do you know what I mean? There's something, entertaining at lunchtime with champagne and whatever, that's part of my work. I feel like there's something almost classist about it. One of the things that struck me, do you remember when Boris Johnson, he was ousted? Yes. And the whole thing that set that off was so first of all, the drinking in politics, particularly, I mean, I can't remember, is there 30 bars in the House of Commons? Particularly, it's just, our leaders are rampant alcoholics. What set it off was an associate of his who got blind drunk at a parliamentary bar and tried to touch up another guy, and it came out as a huge scandal. Yeah. And what came out was Boris Johnson kind of always knew he was a bit of a liability like that, but didn't do anything about it. I think that was what happened, right? And so that was the focus. And I was like, it's the alcohol. It's the alcohol culture that's the problem here.
Well, there was a whole thing during that whole COVID thing that, that parties that were going on. But as you say, yes, it was about, well, we are working so hard. How do you put the two together? You're talking about something that makes you inefficient. You don't work so well. You're not going to be at your best by any means at all. Can't make decisions. I mean, you've only got to look at people who do very simple sort of driving, those sort of mock driving tests or pinball machines under alcohol, and how inefficient they suddenly become after one drink and they think they're doing fine. But I mean, how can you put together using a substance that's going to make you less efficient, more likely to make mistakes, sometimes very costly mistakes, and the work? I don't get how you put those two things together, and yet they have become married. They are work and alcohol. Yep. And as we said at the start, well, that's what we do in my profession. We drink a lot, and I think you'll find that a lot of people I've seen at some point or other, they will get round to saying, well, it's very difficult in my profession to be sober because of everybody else. And it doesn't stand up to logic, but it's been around a long time.
So another story a client told me is she went on a company retreat, and the year before, she'd been quite, drunk at it, and then she'd done it sober, and how differently she saw everything. And here's the thing, and we've talked about this before, it's kind of almost similar to the high-end drinking. It's like the company get together, the team building, the discussion of strategy is secondary to the drinking. The drinking is the main point. And she told me a story about one of her fellow executives who got really drunk, and she said, I saw her the next day, and she had like a bruise or something, like she'd obviously fallen over. And anyway, the woman ended up losing her job a few weeks later. And she said, she was in the car with her, and she was like, oh, I just, opened the wardrobe and I wasn't looking, and she said, I could just sense that. I said, that's a person who's not okay.
Yeah.
And how that delusion of getting stuck in the delusion that you can't, of trying to manage it, and how, she saw it differently, and she was able to navigate it. And I want to talk a little bit about navigating this, like when you do become a non-drinker, because you can it's a perception, it's not true. You can still stay in your career.
Absolutely.
I've known sober people in every career, right? Yep. Even I do think hospitality is probably the worst, because it's just, that's what it's all about. But I've known not everyone who's sober in every career. And I think, the first thing is I would downplay it. I'd just be like, I wouldn't announce that you're sober because it makes everyone feel uncomfortable.
Sure.
I would always have something in your hand that could be conceived as something with alcohol, so people don't bother to always have something in your hand that's at least half full, so nobody offers to get you a drink. And just be a casual like, oh no, not now, I'm good, thanks. That's the way I would play it initially, to not make a big deal about it.
I would as well. And certainly probably in the first year, while you're getting comfortable with the idea of not drinking yourself, but you're even more uncomfortable about saying to work colleagues where they may take a negative view of it. And because people often do take a negative view of you saying you're not drinking anyway, whatever the circumstances. But if drinking culture, again, I've had a lot of clients going, well, we're going out to a big dinner with a client. What am I going to do? How am I going to say that I'm, not drinking? Now, in the UK, I think that's a bigger problem than in America, where I think you can say I'm in recovery, and people actually applaud it rather than query it. The thing that strikes me is that there are all kinds of, you said conferences, you said meetings and things like that, and, schmoozing guest clients and things like that. And it's the way that we kind of make it okay, because it's a work environment, to be able to get away with drinking a lot, which if it was in a domestic environment, you wouldn't be acceptable at all. But because it's got this label of work and stress and relief from it all, it kind of is okay. And there would be, as I said, I think there's quite often conversations that go on, particularly at this time of year, about how drunk somebody got the night before and how inappropriate they were, but, and how sloppy everybody got about things but there's definitely something that we search out for when we are drinking too much. We search out for excuses to make it okay. And work, I think, is one of the places that gives us an ideal haven for being able to say, well, this is why I drink too much. I drink too much because I'm a plumber. I drink too much because I'm a builder. I drink too much because I'm in the finance industry.
Because I work in finance, or because I work in,
whatever.
100%.
Yeah. When we drink too much, we're always looking for some little safe place where I can make my behavior acceptable. But I completely agree with you that when you break out of that by getting sober, which is difficult, then nowadays we've talked about it in many previous podcasts. If non-alcoholic beers or spirits are your thing, have one of those in your hand. Try to limit the possibilities of questions being asked, try and, because it's very difficult. It's fine now. I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with it now at all, but I think it's very, very different when you're in the early stages of having the confidence to say, no, I'm not drinking, and to turn your wine glass upside down or whatever it is that you do, or have a word with a, it's fine after a couple of years. But at the beginning, it's really, really hard work and really difficult to do. And
because a lot of it is like, again, I'm fine as well. I don't care. But also because the people who know us and that we meet now only meet us as we are now, right?
Yes.
I think for a lot of our clients, all these people have known and seen them as real drinkers, right?
Yeah.
Like in the thick of it, drinking.
Yeah.
So that is always the hardest bit. Once you meet new people and they don't know you any other way, people don't know me any other way. But it is hard when people have experience. Well, last year on the company retreat, you were like doing tequila shots, and now you're not. So it does. So I always encourage, truth is always the best option. But I always think if you have to say, I'm on medication, I'm not drinking right now, I think that is an acceptable fib.
That's a good one. Yeah, you need to shut them up quite quickly.
Insistent, you just don't want to have that conversation.
You've got to shut them up. Yeah, you've got to shut them up quite quickly. But the other thing is that one of the criteria for diagnosing somebody as having an alcohol problem is that they have continually tried to stop drinking. And so this thing about telling people that you've stopped drinking, normal people don't feel the need to do that. Normal drinkers never feel the need to tell anybody that they've stopped drinking because they're just drinking normally. They're just, they're not. But you're right. Those people they've got a bit of a reputation for being a heavy drinker. And so they're kind of explaining why they're not being that person any longer is much, much greater. A normal drinker, you wouldn't even notice that they're not drinking because they don't drink a lot. But a heavy drinker, you will notice the change in their behavior a lot. And it does therefore kind of require a justification. And I do think that the allergy one, the medication one is a good one. Practically every month in the year is now sober October, dry January, whatever. You can almost pick any month in the year. I would always try and veer a little bit away from things that are time limited, like medication, because I'm on antibiotics at the moment, so I can't drink. Okay, well, in 3 weeks' time, you're able to drink. Yeah. So I always try and find something that isn't time limited.
Yeah.
I'm doing a marathon and I've got to get in training or something. That's a little bit longer. It is incredible how insistent people are about this thing. I've stopped driving to work now. I take the train. You don't get 20 questions about why you've stopped driving and why you've taken. They just go, oh, all right, okay.
Or I've cut out gluten or something.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to say, well, why? Why have you cut out gluten? I haven't cut out gluten. Why? Well, I'm not.
Could you just have one bread roll? Just one bread roll.
Exactly. Yeah, surely. Come on, have one. Have one. No, I think there was a change to that slightly during the fact that the workplace has changed, and we've touched this on an earlier podcast about how the work dynamic has changed. So that times when you would get everybody in the office together, so that the kind of when the drink came out, it was very much a communal activity. Now you're not getting the whole team in the office at the same time. I think time will tell, but maybe when people now do get together for those Christmas parties and those other kind of office celebrations, whether because it's an unusual thing, the tendency to behave in an unusual way will be that much more enhanced, that people will go, well, we haven't had one of these for years. Let's really get drunk, because it won't be something that happens on a regular basis.
The point that we're making here is there is an elevated risk to do this with people you work with and who are your bosses. Yeah. The risk, it's so different than if it was just your rugby mates or your mates from college, right? I mean, you could drink as much and do stupid things, but the risk that you could have. So I remember when I was working in the youth offending service in Cambridge. Youth offending service for Americans was like probation for kids under 18 who were getting in trouble with the police.
Okay,
and it was a big office. There was about 40 or 50 of us. It was a big office.
Wow.
Lots of different oh God, what's the word? Multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
Multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
And typical in England, you go like I've never worked anywhere that doesn't have like a Christmas do.
No, nor have
So
I. Yeah.
we and it was quite a young office. It was quite a lot of 20s, 30s. I was about 30 at the time. So we went out for our Christmas do, and we went to like a comedy night, and then we went to our nightclub. Now our boss, he was a great boss. He was the whatever, I can't remember what it was, but he was in charge of that whole department.
Commissioner.
So he was very senior.
Yeah.
He was very senior. He had to then interact with the police commissioner, very senior. He was there. We went out. I love to dance. We went to nightclub. Anyway, he was trolleyed, absolutely drunk. Now it was amusing because we were in this nightclub and he danced very badly for hours, and it was very, very amusing. But it could have easily gone the other way. Now, imagine if he had done, again, you are a whisker away from doing something, and then immediately your authority would have gone in that office. Yep. Everybody would have been gossiping about you. Everyone would have been talking about you. I mean, that's a huge thing to overcome. The risk, it's the risk happens when you drink like that. And I've known lots of careers end because of it. And it's just so normal. It's so normalized. So something to think about the culture in your work and drinking, and that it is absolutely possible to navigate that as a sober person. And it's just, the other thing, it's going to just benefit you massively. Like, I was a terrible employee when I was drinking. I was not productive, and I was constantly hungover, and either hungover or couldn't wait for the weekend to begin, or having a sneaky pint at lunchtime. I think the other thing is when you don't drink, and if you are ambitious in whatever industry you're in, I think that's the edge. You've got the edge there. You've kind of got some magic ingredients that other people don't have, because you're never going to feel hungover. You're never going to be at risk of doing anything stupid or embarrassing, and you're going to have your full bandwidth. You're never going to be preoccupied about, alcohol or that kind of stuff. I think it's a secret superpower that you'll have in, I've said that to a couple of my clients who have been very ambitious and kind of doing well in their industry. I'm like, this is your superpower now. Yeah. You will do better than your peers just because of this, because you'll have access to so much of yourself that you wouldn't have, because alcohol preoccupies us so much. So it's a great way to do really well in whatever industry, and you can still partake in the sort of socializing. Again, like when I was younger, in my 30s, and I would go on work dues with people who drank. Sure. There was, I enjoy it up to a certain point. There was always, if there was some dancing, it's great. And then I've got my car. I can leave at like 11:30 and drive home and leave them to it. I'm not really interested when people get messy drunk, but I've had quite a nice time and it's been fine. We used to have, when we worked at Focus, we always had a nice, we went to, what's that French restaurant? Yeah. Those were nice. Those were nice.
And I was just saying, thankfully, in my career, because my career started sort of coincided with my sobriety, I've never had to do a kind of drunken. It was always none of us drank. We all went out, and everybody I worked with, we didn't drink. So I've never had to have that problem, thankfully. But because I'm sure I would have made a mess of it if I hadn't. But the thing about, I was just thinking about that. We had a lot of fun at those things. And when I think of all the works... Oh,
they were like 6-hour lunches. Yeah. We would go at 12 and be there still at 4:30, like telling stories. Like I remember, like we would, it was dark by the time we left. I remember that happening.
Exactly. And I remember all the kind of work activities I've gone on in working in rehabs and things like that. They've always been amazingly good fun. Amazingly good fun.
We've had a blast. Yeah. So love to, when we post this, love for you to tell us on social media what any of your experiences of workplace drinking cultures and what the industry that you're in and some of the stories. I'm sure people have got tons of stories about stuff that they've experienced and they've seen as well. So we would love to hear about that. And we, whatever workplace event you have over the holidays, I hope that you can navigate that safely and soberly
and enjoyably.
All right, we will be I've enjoyed many a Christmas do sober, and it's always more fun. All right, everybody, we will see you next week. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.
Thank you.